Lippincott Farms hosts their farm days and students give their thoughts on vice presidential debates.
Plus, Waynesburg University offers help for those affected by Hurricane Helene, and PennDOT prepares for the winter weather. All this and more coming up on the newscast live at 5.
And now, your 5 o'clock news on Channel 14.
Welcome into WCTV's Newscast live at 5. I'm Sarah Clegg.
And I'm Chris Fox.
This past weekend, Lippincott Alpaca Farm held their farm days with vendors, food trucks, and more for people for Waynesburg and surrounding areas to have a good time. WCTV's Seth Evans was at the event and has more.
The Lippincott Alpaca Farm hosted their annual Farm Days open house this past weekend on Saturday, September 28th and Sunday, September 29th, where residents of Waynesburg and elsewhere could gather to see the several attractions that the farm had to offer.
I've been coming to the alpaca farm for probably a little over 6 years, and probably in the last 3 years is when I came and started vending, and I have all the different hats and scarves and socks and little toys that I make, so that's what I vend at the show. I learned to knit when I was 12 years old, so it's been many, many years. I'm not telling you how many, but many years I've been knitting. I learned in home ec class in middle school.
This is my only event. Lena and Phil are good friends of mine, and this is the only event that I set up for. Usually I do a demonstration. Gotcha. We have a few alpaca things to sell, but mostly I demonstrate. Probably since about 2007. So I've been here a very long time.
From 1 to 5 p.m. on both days, visitors could gather and tour the several vendors, purchase some alpaca-related gear, or watch Mrs. Lena Galing interact with the livestock and teach the public about the unique life of raising alpacas. Of the vendors that were present, Mary Toth and Mary Briggs, two retirees who have been regular vendors for the open house going on several years for each of them, elaborated on what their stands had to offer, as well as how they became friends with Lena and her husband Philip Galing.
I think I first met Lena, it was when Waynesburg used to have their Sheep and Fiber Fest. And that's where I first met her and learned about the farm, and then she invited me out because she had Tuesday nights or knit nights.
I became friends with them through the Chamber of Commerce in Waynesburg, so Melody Longstreth in there, and through the Sheep and Fiber Festival that used to be put on at the fairgrounds. That's how I got to know Lena and Phil.
Any information, including tours and informational sessions, can be found on the farm's website. For WCTV News, I'm Seth Evans.
2 nights ago, the first and only vice presidential debate was held. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz debated a number of topics such as crisis at the border, the economy, healthcare, and more. We caught up with some Waynesburg University students for their thoughts on the debate.
I thought it was one of the better debates that we've seen all year. Very professional looking. I mean, the way they handled their respective parties and kind of put themselves out there, I thought was a lot better than we've seen with some of the presidential debates even.
I think the debate was really insightful and robust. I think that both of the candidates did an excellent job speaking on bipartisan issues, as well as just defending negative statements that were made about them by the media. I think overall for the American people it was a really insightful debate, and I think we all have something to learn from it.
So I thought it was a lot more professional than debates we've seen in the past. I like that they were a lot more respectful of each other. I still think the cutting each other off and maybe going too long on a certain topic, they need to work on that. But I just thought it was so much more respectful than the presidential debates and the other vice presidential debates we've seen before.
I was really happy to see how eloquent both vice presidential candidates were. I really appreciated the introductions of both candidates. I really appreciated Governor Walz's personal anecdotes, and I thought I didn't know much about J.D. Vance beforehand, but his eloquence and decorum throughout the entire thing were notable and very favorable on both candidates.
Hurricane Helene has devastated North Carolina and other East Coast states. Now Waynesburg University is offering some help. The university is hosting a hurricane relief drive to help the victims of the tragic storm. Each department in the university is being asked to donate certain items, as you can see in the chart listed on the screen now. For other ways to help those who have been affected by Hurricane Helene, visit redcross.org to learn more.
Yesterday, PennDOT began preparing for the coming winter months. In partnership with the PA Turnpike, PennDOT highlighted their preparations for the winter season to ensure Pennsylvanians can travel safely through the state. PennDOT Secretary Mike Curl said, "Keeping Pennsylvania's travel as safe as possible is at the core of the PennDOT's mission, and the new lighting option signed into law by the governor is another way we can enhance safety." PennDOT vehicles are now equipped with additional green lights incorporated with existing flashing yellow lights to increase visibility on roads for Pennsylvanian travelers. The law was signed on July 17th earlier this year.
Coming up, more on Hurricane Helene as the East Coast states struggle to deal with the damage.
Plus more on the vice presidential debate from this past Tuesday coming up on the Newscast live at 5.
Welcome back to the Newscast live at 5. Hurricane Helene hit Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina hard. Now hundreds of roads remain closed, several towns still isolated. One of the biggest response hurdles remains decimated power and communication grids. Recovery efforts are at a critical stage as Helene's death toll across the southeast creeps up. At last check, at least 189 people were reported dead, and that number expected to climb in the days ahead. The living are trying to get needed supplies like food, water, and medicine. Cheryl Hubbard has the story.
The worst of Hurricane Helene may still be untold.
We are still searching.
Hundreds of people are believed to be missing. In one Tennessee community Wednesday, loved ones held up photos.
What about these families that are waiting to hear about their families? When are they going to get the closure they need?
Anxiously awaiting status updates on their loved ones.
We are trying our best to bring answers and closure to families about their loved ones.
More than 4,500 federal personnel are helping in recovery efforts in hard-struck areas. FEMA says the terrain in some areas may complicate recovery efforts.
As we look at the infrastructure damages to water, to the cell lines, to power, the ability to get those turned back on is going to be complicated just by the way Appalachia is configured.
With many failed roads, many crucial supplies are being delivered by airdrop, and in some cases, mule train. Wednesday afternoon, Vice President Kamala Harris toured debris in Augusta, Georgia.
There's a lot of work that's going to need to happen over the coming days, weeks, and months.
Also Wednesday, President Joe Biden finally getting a first-hand look at the cataclysmic conditions left in Helene's wake in western North Carolina. He pledged every available resource to assist in the recovery efforts.
The United States, the nation, has your back. The nation has your back. We're not leaving till you're back on your feet completely.
I'm Cheryl Hubbard reporting.
Helene is the second deadly storm to hit the U.S. in the last 55 years, only behind Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The storm is now blamed for at least 191 deaths across 6 states. Wednesday, President Biden toured storm damage in North Carolina. He's ordered up to 1,000 active duty soldiers to deliver critical aid, food, and water to the hardest hit communities. But FEMA is still struggling to reach some remote areas. CNN's Isabel Rosales got exclusive access to join a team heading into one of the most remote locations in the state.
Rare and exclusive access. Look at that, it just falls apart. CNN guided up the Blue Ridge Mountains by one of FEMA's 24 deployed urban search and rescue teams. We're deep in hard-hit Avery County, North Carolina. It just collapsed all the side of them. Portions of Beach Mountain, a remote ski resort town, left unrecognizable by Helene's wrath. The sides of the road just like washed off there. These winding mountain roads made further difficult to navigate by obstacles. We are entering an area that's closed off to regular people. Only first responders are allowed. And it is because it's so treacherous. We're seeing it for ourselves, like thick mud all over the place, trees that are down, portions of the road has crumbled down. So I'm really concentrating here. This is difficult to drive. And even when debris and fallen trees are cleared by chainsaw and manpower to make way for rescuers, another major barrier. This FEMA supervisor who's been on his cell phone trying to get in touch with his team to figure out where they're at. Division Group Supervisor Colin Burress pulls us over.
Can't get a signal. We're seeing for ourselves everything that the governor has been talking about, officials have been talking about, how big of a challenge communication is, not just for civilians, but you guys trying to do these rescue operations.
It is. You know, when you don't have cell service, email, text, all of that becomes a challenge, and it kind of slows things down a little.
Tremendous, right? How frustrating is that?
I don't know, you get used to it. You know, you get out on enough of these, but you just kind of adapt and overcome.
Then, by pure luck, a few of his men spot us. They found him just out of the blue, so this is great. We're being reunited, and here's a command post right here. This 80-member FEMA team assisting the North Carolina National Guard, now on day 6 of rescuing survivors stranded and cut off from help.
So ESA's trained to find live people, and Crush is trained to find human remains.
They huddle over maps.
Beach Mountain and Seven Devils is kind of a priority.
Working out the next day's urgent search. How does this work? You guys are doing grids? I see this black line right here.
Yeah, it's just easier for us to keep up. So we'll send squads. We'll say, you know, hit grid 1 or grid 2, grid 3, grid 4.
Before sunset, we roll out. We came up about 3 miles, but honestly, it feels like 10. Back down the mountain, a second look at what Helene laid to waste. Before we can make it down, another danger getting through these torn and treacherous roads.
This is a special case. Typically, the roads washed out, in a mountain atmosphere like this. Hurricanes usually happen, towards the coast. But this is definitely more challenges for us that we haven't faced before.
Regardless, first responders across the state push on. More than 400 people rescued so far, says the governor's office. But the work nowhere near done until all the missing are found.
Last night's vice presidential showdown proving to be a more traditional debate than the mudslinging of recent past. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz facing off in New York City for a fast-paced and at times fiery policy-driven debate. Brian Abel brings us the highlights from New York.
The running mates taking center stage for the only vice presidential debate, quickly addressing foreign policy following Iran's attack on Israel just hours earlier.
It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous.
For people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world.
Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Republican Senator J.D. Vance clashing on immigration.
Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this, and he promised you, America, how easy it would be.
And the economy.
If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago.
Walz struggling when confronted about his claim of being present for the deadly Tiananmen Square protest.
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke.
And Vance deflecting when asked about Trump's false claims that he won the 2020 election.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
In New York, Brian Abel reporting.
Following the debate, a CNN poll shows that voters are split almost right down the middle regarding who they thought had a better performance. More than 500 registered voters who watched were polled after the debate, according to a CNN instant poll of debate watchers conducted by an SSRS debate. The debate watchers were closely divided over which candidate did the better job. 51% said Vance won the debate, and 49% said Walz won. Also, the event left viewers with more positive views both candidates than they held pre-debate. The sample of debate watchers in the poll was 33% Democrat, 32% Republican, and 34% Independent.
This Tuesday was the first and only face-off between Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and some of the issues they discussed are playing out right now. Our political correspondent Julia Brenbrook joins us from New York with a more in-depth look at the debate.
It was a civil and policy-focused showdown where both addressed a wide range of issues, including the economy, immigration, and abortion rights. Some of the first topics that came up are developing right now, both at home and abroad. The Hurricane Helene recovery efforts and the escalating tensions in the Middle East following Iran's missile attacks on Israel. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz stepped onto the debate stage, while major stories developed both at home and abroad. The vice presidential nominees were asked to address climate change as the Hurricane Helene recovery efforts continue.
There's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax.
If they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America.
Hours before the debate started, Iran launched a missile attack against Israel. Vice President Kamala Harris joined President Joe Biden and top military officials in the Situation Room to monitor the response by Israeli and U.S. forces. Harris's running mate arguing that what is needed is steady leadership.
What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together.
Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump criticized the Biden administration and claimed that this would not have happened if he were president. His running mate making the argument that Trump would bring back stability.
Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength.
Today, the vice presidential nominees are back on the campaign trail. Vance is in Michigan for a pair of events focused on the economy and manufacturing, while Walz is in central Pennsylvania for a bus tour and rally. Reporting in New York, I'm Julia Benbrook.
New York Mayor Eric Adams could have additional charges added to his federal corruption case. During a hearing Wednesday, the prosecutor and investigators have evidence Adams allegedly tried to tamper with a witness, calling it a significant instance of witness interference. Although the judge said he would not set a trial date yet, Adams' attorney indicated that Ben's team hoped to have the trial completed by March due to the timeline for next year's mayoral race. The next hearing is scheduled for November 1st. Adams is facing 5 federal counts of bribery, corruption, wire fraud, and soliciting, and accepting donations from foreign nationals. He pleaded not guilty at his arraignment last week, and he has said he has done nothing wrong.
That will do it for national news. Coming up next is Annabelle Bagley with business and entertainment. But first, we step outside with Anthony DeFilippo for a quick look at the weather.
Warm weather here in Waynesburg, Pennsylvania as October begins, still sitting in the mid-70s. Will that continue this week? All that and more on the Newscast live at 5.
Welcome back to the Newscast. I'm Annabelle Bagley with your business and entertainment update. One of the 2 doctors charged in Matthew Perry's death pleaded guilty on Wednesday. Mark Chavez could be sentenced to up to 10 years in prison for helping provide ketamine to the Friend star. Perry died last year at 54 years old due to the effects of the drugs and drowning. Chavez's sentencing is set to take place April 2nd of next year. That's after the trial of Dr. Salvatore Placencia and Javin Senga is set to begin on March 4th. They're both pleading not guilty and helping provide the medication. Perry's personal assistant and acquaintance of the actor also have sentencing hearings in the next several months. They have both pleaded guilty. The legal troubles of Sean Diddy Combs appear to be growing. A Houston-based attorney says he plans to file civil suits on behalf of the 120 people who claim to be victimized by Combs and other individuals. The musician and businessman was indicted on federal charges, including sex trafficking, earlier this month. He has pleaded not guilty. CNN's Elizabeth Wagmeister reports.
More than 100 new accusers plan to pursue legal claims against Sean Diddy Combs, according to their attorney.
These are people that were there, that were that were allegedly drugged and then allegedly raped, passed around, woke up the next morning with just completely clueless about what had happened to them.
Combs denies the allegations, his lawyer telling CNN in part, Mr. Combs emphatically and categorically denies as false and defamatory any claim that he sexually abused anyone, including minors. Combs already faces a dozen civil lawsuits and has pleaded not guilty to charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Houston attorney Tony Busby tells CNN he intends to file individual lawsuits against Combs for each of the 120 new accusers, some who he says have already spoken to the FBI.
Do you have video evidence of your clients allegedly being sexually abused?
It's full-on video of things happening that would never be appropriate for public viewing.
Busby says he's in the process of collecting video, photos, text messages, medical records, and drug tests.
Many of your clients have alleged to you that they were given a horse tranquilizer.
You know, you hear that one time and you think that's really strange. You hear it 3 or 4 or 5 times, all of a sudden you're like, holy, well, what is going on here?
In the indictment, federal authorities also accuse Combs of drugging victims.
They do not believe that Sean Combs acted alone.
I do agree with the FBI and the federal authorities. I do think that there were a lot of individuals involved and a lot of entities involved.
Household names, are we talking about celebrities, executives in the entertainment industry?
All the above, yes.
We've all heard about the white parties. Just because a celebrity is photographed wearing white at a Sean Combs party does not mean that they are complicit in any criminal activity.
The white party comes up quite often and typically later in the night with the same MO, a drink laced with something in some cases.
Was this all happening in plain sight at these parties?
That's the allegation, that people saw exactly what was going on and did nothing about it.
Tony Busby says out of the 120 accusers, half of them are men. 25 of the new accusers say they were minors at the time of the alleged incidents. We often throw around the phrase a dime a dozen, but when it comes to a dozen eggs, you'll need more like 32 dimes. New numbers show egg prices spiked in price this year far more than any other food item that government tracks. Emily Smith has more on why and how experts say you might scramble for some savings in this Consumer Watch.
The price of eggs are up a little over 28%. And frankly, you know, what we're seeing is just the beginning of what could bring it to record highs. Egg production is down in July about 2.5%. So that has a ripple effect onto the shelves of our supermarkets.
Any economist would tell you there's tension there between supply and demand, and we're entering our historically highest demand season.
Forget the brown eggs. Use the white eggs to save a little bit of money.
You can actually freeze eggs, and so if you crack them out of the shell, put them in a Tupperware container, you can freeze them if you're not using them up by the expiration dates.
A former Spider-Man could return to the role, if it's up to him, that is. Andrew Garfield told Esquire in a new interview he'd 100% be into portraying the character again. Garfield was Spidey in 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man and its sequel 2 years later. But here's the thing. Even though those films came out while other Marvel movies were weaving the Infinity Saga story, they weren't a part of that. Later films starring Tom Holland as the web slinger were considered elements of that storyline. Garfield and Tobey Maguire, who played Spider-Man in even earlier films, did make cameos in 2021's Spider-Man No Way Home. As of now, Marvel has not said it plans to produce a third film in the Amazing Spider-Man series. A 4-time Oscar nominee is back with a new film based on an acclaimed memoir. David Daniel talked with her for today's Hollywood Minute.
You can feel a vibration in Orkney. It takes over the whole island and every part of your body. But there is only so much height any wave can sustain before it comes crashing down.
Saoirse Ronan produces and stars in The Outrun, based on Amy Liptrott's memoir. She plays a woman who reluctantly leaves London for her family home in Scotland's Orkney Islands in an attempt to get and stay sober.
It's truly a memoir. It's documenting a point in someone's life, the highs and the lows. And addiction, and her addiction is obviously almost sort of the villain of the piece, but there is such a rich world and life around her. And really the sort of heart of the story is her rediscovering that, is seeing what's been around her this whole time.
My body is a continent. My breath pushes the clouds across the sky. And the waves roll into the shore in time with my beating heart.
The Outrun is in theaters Friday. In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
That will do it for your business and entertainment update. I'm Annabelle Bagley. When we return for the newscast, Meg Berry has your sports.
Have you ever wondered what the life of a Yellow Jacket newspaper looks like? Why don't we show you? Straight from the printing press to our editor's desk into the newsstands, you can pick up your own copy of the Yellow Jacket newspaper in Buell Hall, the Stover Campus Center, or any of our other newsstand locations on campus. When you get your very own copy, you can read it at your own leisure anywhere around Waynesburg. You can kill time waiting for your next class to start by reading up on campus news and our op-ed pieces. You can even take your copy to the Beehive and catch up with friends as you read up on the latest regional stories. Looking for a peaceful place to read now? Head on over to the Everly Library. Sit back, relax, and catch up on the latest in Waynesburg sports. Oh, and if you didn't know, we're also digital at theyellowjacket.org.
Good evening, I'm Meg Berry here with this week's sports report. The Waynesburg University football team gathered their first win of the season against St. Vincent this past Saturday. Zane Cawley scored 2 rushing touchdowns, finishing the day with 149 yards. Nahimi Marks scored a 3-yard passing touchdown to help secure the win. The Yellow Jackets won 21-7 against the Bearcats. For their next game, they will travel to Carnegie Mellon on Saturday at 7 p.m. Tune in to WCYJ-FM for live coverage of the game from Will Yoakum and Brandon Bennett. Men's soccer is now in 3rd place in the President's Athletic Conference with a 2-0-1 record after a 1-1 draw to Allegheny yesterday. During a hard-fought game without starting goalkeeper Michael Frankus, who started every game since now, but is out with an injury, and sophomore Zachary Reed started in the net. After an early goal from Allegheny, the Jackets fought back to secure a goal by Michael Canoe at the 71st minute. The next game for the Jackets is this Saturday against Washington and Jefferson at home at 4 p.m. As for women's soccer, they also tied to Allegheny last night 1-1. The Jackets scored the first goal with a goal from Jules Moorbacher in the 25th minute. But they were unable to hold on and ultimately ended the game in a tie. The women are currently in 9th place in the pack with an 0-2-1 record. Their next game is also this Saturday at home against Washington and Jefferson with a kickoff set at 1 p.m. Moving ahead to men's and women's golf, both teams are wrapping up the season before the fall PAC tournament. The tournament is in Warren, Ohio at Avalon Lakes course. That match will take place on the 14th and 15th of this month. The women's tennis team fell to Teal College this past Wednesday. In a very close match, the Yellow Jackets lost 3-4. The team's next match is tomorrow at home against Geneva at 5 p.m. The women's volleyball team sits 4-9 overall and 0-1 in the conference and is coming off a great 3-0 win against Penn State Shenango. Heading into the back half of the season, it's nothing but PAC play for the Yellow Jackets. Their next game is at Teal on Monday at 7 p.m. To finish off Waynesburg University sports, the men's and women's cross-country team will travel to New Concord, Ohio for the Muskingum Invitational this Saturday. Now looking forward to Sunday, the Pittsburgh Steelers play on Sunday Night Football against the 2-2 Cowboys. After a close matchup between the Indianapolis Colts and the Steelers gathered their first loss of the season. Yet it was another hard-fought loss after they scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. But it wasn't enough to secure the win. We will see what they do this Sunday against the Cowboys, who are missing key defensive players in Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. That's going to do it all for your sports. Up next is Anthony DeFilippo with your weather here on the Newscast, live at 5.
Welcome back to the Newscast Live at 5. I'm Anthony DeFilippo with your weekly weather update. As we begin October, it looks like summer isn't ready to go just yet. Currently, we're sitting at a warm 76 degrees here in Greene County, and we won't see temperatures rise much higher than that today. No rain is expected. Looking ahead to tomorrow, it's shaping up to be a great day for Friday Night Lights with a high of 81 and a low of 50 and only a 4% chance of rain. Saturday continues this trend with a high of 74 and low of 48, along with just a 3% chance of rain. However, Sunday begins a shift with rain chances increasing to 25%. Expect another warm day with a high of 82 and a low of 51. Moving on to Monday, we'll finally start to feel that fall weather. The high will drop to 67 degrees with a low of 40, and it should remain dry with just a 9% chance of rain. Tuesday will be the coldest day of the week with a high of just 61 degrees and a low dipping down to 39. Rain chances stay low at 9%. Finally, we wrap up the week on Wednesday with a high of 62 and a low nearing freezing at 36 degrees. The chance of rain, just 8%. That's your weather forecast for the week. I'm Anthony DeFilippo. Now let's send it back to Sarah Clegg and Chris Fox at the desk.
That will do it for the Newscast Live at 5. For everyone behind the scenes and in front of the camera, thank you for watching.
Stay tuned on our WCTV YouTube page and social media platforms for more Waynesburg content.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.